Welcome back to the deep dive. You know how we operate here. You send us the source material, the articles, the notes, the research that has truly captured your attention, and we wade into it, no matter how extraordinary, to pull out the most compelling insights.
Uh-huh.
Today, we are undertaking a deep dive into material that promises an insider's look into the operational structure of high-level occultism and the mechanics of what the authors define as continuous spiritual warfare.
The document we are unpacking is based on excerpts from the book He Came to Set the Captives Free, written by Rebecca Brown, M.D.
Okay.
It is presented as a powerful testimonial collaboration between Dr. Brown, a physician whose life was, unexpectedly thrust into what she views as active spiritual combat,
Right.
and a figure named Elaine, who is described within this very complex narrative as a former high priestess.
A high priestess.
And not just any. She eventually rose to become the highest-ranking woman in the U.S. branch of the cult, the top bride of Satan.
Wow. Okay. What immediately makes this source stand out, beyond just the sheer scale of its claims, is the commitment to this, granular, practical detail.
It's not abstract at all.
No, it's not just a general story of the occult. It's a field manual. It covers everything from internal cult discipline and hierarchy to prescribed strategies for physical, spiritual, and mental defense.
And we have to mention the warning.
Oh, we have to. It's printed right there on the source material itself, isn't it?
In all caps, Satan does not want you to read this material.
Which, that immediately sets a framework for understanding what you're about to get into.
It absolutely does. It posits that this information is genuinely dangerous to the powers it describes. It creates this atmosphere of immediate high-stakes exposure.
Right.
So our mission today is to navigate Rebecca and Elaine's extensive and, frankly, often chilling narrative impartially. We're going to focus on decoding the specific structure of this cult, the Brotherhood, the claimed nature of their demonic powers, and the very, very detailed methods they prescribe for believers who seek to engage in this form of intensive spiritual warfare.
Okay, let's unpack this. We begin with Rebecca's perspective, a physician who suddenly found her sterile, scientific environment invaded by forces she just could not explain. So let's start with her initial terrifying entry into conflict at Memorial Hospital.
Rebecca's journey starts as she accepts a position during her medical internship at Memorial Hospital. The source says she noticed something immediately, like the moment she walked in.
What was it?
She termed it a hovering of darkness, which is, that's not just stress or bad lighting.
No.
She had this deep intuitive sense that something spiritually unique and malevolent was just permeating the atmosphere of the entire institution.
And the physical toll this took on her was immense. The schedule she was working was it was absolutely brutal.
Oh, it was unbelievable. Sometimes clocking in up to 120 hours per week. Yeah.
120. So when her health started to fail, and we're talking relentless nausea, exhaustion, a steady physical decline, she just rationalized it.
Completely. She attributed it purely to the demanding schedule of a young medical resident. What else would you think?
Sure.
But that's the critical pivot point, though. Her physical exhaustion was compounded by, or, maybe it was as a symptom of, a deepening spiritual compulsion.
A compulsion to do what?
She felt compelled by the Holy Spirit to change her routine entirely. She began arriving at the hospital early each morning.
How early?
Early enough to spend an hour in dedicated prayer for the city and for the hospital itself.
And was she praying for something specific?
Very specific. Her request was for the Lord to restrain the powers of darkness that she intuitively sensed were active in that location. She would often cite this ancient prayer from the book of Numbers, "Rise up, Lord, and let thine enemies be scattered."
So she had an instinct, a spiritual sense that something was deeply wrong. And then her clinical observations started to back that up, didn't they? Especially when she got assigned to the intensive care unit, the ICU.
That's when things really crystallized for her. She started noticing these patterns that just defied traditional medical explanation.
Such as?
For one, a disturbing frequency of patient deaths that were simply unexplainable. They would happen suddenly, even when vital signs were stable.
That's terrifying.
But what really amplified her concern were the cases of ICU psychoses. Now, this is a real well-known phenomenon in intensive care.
Right, where patients get delusional or they hallucinate from the stress and the isolation of the unit.
Exactly. But her patients weren't seeing ordinary hallucinations, were they?
No, they weren't.
When Rebecca actually sat down and spoke to the patients experiencing the psychosis, almost all of them, regardless of their background or belief system, they reported seeing the exact same thing.
Which was?
Demons in their rooms.
They described specific terrifying entities that the patients believed were actively trying to kill them. And it was that highly specific shared experience that convinced her something else was going on.
It had to be something beyond the typical stress response. The consistency was just too much to ignore.
So naturally, as a responsible physician, she would try to raise the issue within her professional circles. But how did the established medical hierarchy respond to her concerns?
It was complete institutional denial and suppression.
They shut her down.
Totally. Rebecca tried to raise these concerns, the idea of some underlying, maybe organized issue, in the regular medical conferences.
Okay.
After her third attempt, she was called into the training director's office. She was reprimanded harshly and basically told to shut her mouth.
Wow.
The threat was explicit.
Yeah.
You're not experienced enough to talk about this, and if you continue to create trouble, you will be summarily kicked out of this highly competitive training program.
So she was silenced, just for speaking about the darkness she was experiencing.
That professional isolation is a classic feature in these kinds of narratives, isn't it? And it perfectly sets the stage for the antagonist inside the hospital walls, a nurse named Helen.
Helen, the ICU nurse.
Helen was central to all the occult activity in that hospital. Rebecca eventually discovered she was not just an ordinary nurse, but a powerful, highly disciplined witch and a cult member.
So the battle moves from this internal intuition to a direct external confrontation.
Through a definitive test case, it involved a patient named Pearl, an elderly woman and a devout Christian who was suffering from a really profound ICU psychosis.
Okay.
Rebecca felt this undeniable spiritual draw to just sit at Pearl's bedside all through the night.
And the struggle that followed was described as physical, wasn't it? Even though the force was unseen.
Absolutely. As Rebecca sat there, she felt what she describes as intense, direct, demonic oppression.
What does that even feel like?
Like a crushing, incredible, unseen power trying to physically and spiritually overwhelm her. It was, in her words, trying to suck the very life out of her.
Yeah.
And Pearl felt it too.
So what did she do? She didn't reach for a medical chart, I'm guessing?
No, she reached for Pearl's hand. The two women joined hands, and Rebecca prayed quietly, but with immense authority, claiming the shield of the precious blood of Jesus. The source describes the unseen power just breaking. They successfully overcame the oppression and made it safely through the night.
That one experience must have changed everything for her.
It irrevocably altered her perception of her role and her reality. And then it was confirmed that this was an organized effort when another nurse, Jean, came forward.
Who was Jean?
Jean was a nurse Rebecca had previously led to Christ. She provided the crucial piece of the puzzle.
What did she say?
She revealed that Helen had been actively cultivating her, training her to become a medium, and was preparing her for initiation into the Satanist group, right when Rebecca's arrival sort of disrupted the whole plan.
So that confirmed it. The battle wasn't against germs or exhaustion, but against a highly organized spiritual front operating right there inside the hospital.
And from that point on, the spiritual intensity just cranked up dramatically. Rebecca realized that her extensive medical efforts were not enough on their own.
She had to combine her clinical skills with what? An active practice of spiritual warfare.
Yes, exactly. She learned to stand on particular scriptures, wielding them like a form of authority. Notably, Luke 10.1, which promises power to tread on serpents.
Right.
And Mark 16.16, which commands believers to cast out devils.
And the authors paint a really literal picture of this bedside combat.
It's incredible. Rebecca would be standing silently, battling in prayer on one side of a patient's bed, using her spiritual authority to bind the specific demons of death or oppression.
While on the other side.
Simultaneously, Helen, or other affiliated witches and warlocks, stood on the other side of the bed, directing focused demon power against both Rebecca and the patient.
So the patient's fate became this focal point of a struggle between two actively engaged spiritual forces right there in the ICU.
Yes. And the source claims that medical efforts alone were consistently insufficient without that active spiritual counterbattle.
Wow.
It essentially turns the hospitals into a literal spiritual battleground, where the outcome of your diagnosis and treatment is actually secondary to the spiritual allegiance and power being displayed by the staff members involved.
This all took a huge toll on her, though.
A massive toll. Rebecca's own pre-existing neuromuscular disease got dramatically worse during the sustained conflict, and it forced her to eventually leave the hospital, believing she was dying.
And it was this intense vulnerability and need that ultimately brought her into contact with the key figure in this whole story, Elaine.
That's the transition. Rebecca's path was one of forced conflict, but Elaine's story, Hers begins with this inherent tragic vulnerability that was exploited almost from the moment she was born.
Let's talk about that. Tell us about Elaine's entry into this world.
Elaine was born with severe physical deformities, a hair lip and a cleft palate. These required 16 excruciating years of subsequent plastic surgery.
16 years.
The source really stresses that this created a life marked by constant physical pain, profound loneliness, and just relentless rejection from the outside world.
So that early trauma is presented as the fertile ground for the spiritual powers that would later consume her.
Precisamente. And the initial transaction, the spiritual sale, occurred just 4 days after her birth.
And who orchestrated this?
It was allegedly orchestrated by Helen, the very same nurse Rebecca was battling in the ICU.
So the connections in this organization run deep.
Incredibly deep. Helen, serving as a powerful witch and a contact person for the Brotherhood cult, found Elaine's mother living in absolute poverty, desperately seeking funds for the baby's necessary surgeries.
And Helen made her an offer.
She convinced the mother to sell a very small amount of Elaine's blood in exchange for guaranteed financial support for her lifelong medical care.
And what was the consequence of that seemingly small blood transaction, according to the cult's own mechanics?
The blood was immediately taken to a woman named Grace, a high priestess in the cult. And during a specific ceremony, Grace drank Elaine's blood.
And that did what?
The source claims this act instantly gave Satan legal possession of Elaine's life. And crucially, it opened her up as a home for specific, powerful demons that were intended to mold and shape her destiny toward the occult.
And her mother had no idea.
Her mother, not having any kind of Christian background, didn't grasp the horrific spiritual meaning of that exchange. She only saw the needed financial relief.
So Elaine was marked and possessed from infancy. Years later, how did this inherent demonic presence begin to manifest and actively draw her into the organized cult?
Well, the years of rejection and pain fostered this really deep-seated resentment, especially towards the God she felt had allowed her to suffer so much.
I can understand that.
And she realized that whenever she fought back or embraced cruelty, she experienced this strange, ominous sense of power that offered a kind of temporary psychological relief.
So she started seeking that power out.
Actively, which led her to be recruited by a peer, Sandy, who was shockingly a cult recruiter, leveraging the cover of a church youth group.
That is a chillingly effective method of recruitment, exploiting vulnerability and using the facade of fellowship. What was the pitch Sandy used?
Sandy really focused on Elaine's loneliness and her anger. She lured Elaine to a youth camp run by the cult.
And what was the promise?
Total acceptance, the perfection of her inherent power, and the ultimate rewards of fame or riches. They preyed on her desire to belong and to control her own destiny after a life that was defined by uncontrollable suffering.
And this camp itself wasn't a standard recreational facility, was it? It was a sophisticated front for their operations.
Exactly. The facilities were designed to look innocuous to the public, but they housed areas for practicing clairvoyants, hypnotists, palm readers, tarot card readers, and voodoo experts.
So is their public-facing recruitment center?
The source notes that this was the official deceptive place where the cult routinely met with the unknowing public, offering these services as a continuous recruitment and contact mechanism.
This brings us to the initiation ceremony and the binding contract of blood. Can you walk us through the intensity of that moment as it's described in the source?
Elaine was led to an isolated room, dimly lit by candles arranged in groups of 3 black, red, and white. As the ceremony climaxed, the pentagram on the floor became the center of a dramatic manifestation.
What happened?
A loud whoosh of smoke and blinding light erupted, filling the room instantly with the foul odor of burning sulfur.
And that's when the ultimate figure of evil appeared in physical form.
A huge, terrifying demon, described as roughly 8 feet tall, appeared in the center of the circle, just glowering at Elaine, surrounded by an aura of flames.
And Grace, the high priestess, delivered the ultimatum.
Yes. If Elaine refused to obey and sign the contract, she would be handed over to that demon for immediate, protracted torture until death.
The fear must have been absolute, but that, combined with the lust for the power she saw Grace wielding, it led her to sign. How did the signing physically affect her?
She signed the contract using a quill pen dipped in her own blood, dedicating her body, soul, and spirit to Satan.
And the moment she did?
The moment the pen left the paper, the source claims she was instantly knocked violently to the floor by a powerful, intense electronic surge of energy that coursed through her body. It was like a supernatural confirmation of the transaction.
This initiation marked the beginning of an incredibly rapid ascent through the hierarchy for her.
She was no longer a novice. A black robe was placed over her initial white one. She then underwent intensive training for 20 months, mastering incantations and the mechanics of conjuring spirits to carry out her bidding.
And her trainers explicitly told her that these powers she was accessing were channeled directly from the powerful demons now residing inside her.
Correct. She became a high priestess and ultimately achieved the status of top bride of Satan in the U.S. That is described as the absolute highest rank a woman could reach.
And how did she maintain that power over others?
Her power over lesser cult members was absolute and often demonstrated brutally. The source recounts a truly shocking display of this authority during a disagreement with another powerful witch. Elaine, simply by directing her will and her demonic power, pushed the witch into a solid wall with a single look.
Pushed her into the wall.
Literally embedded the woman into the structure.
Yeah.
They claimed the witch had to be physically cut out of the wall and sustained many broken bones.
That would certainly reinforce the terror and obedience required throughout the organization.
Absolutely.
And her relationship with Satan himself as the top bride involved direct physical visits. How did the source characterize his appearance, especially in those early days?
The initial appearances were entirely deceptive. Satan physically appeared to Elaine, not as a monster, but as an exceedingly handsome, very bright and sunny and shining man.
So an angel of light.
Seemingly overflowing with warmth and love. The source emphasizes that this beautiful, loving guise utterly deceived her, fulfilling her profound, lifelong desire to feel loved and accepted for the very first time. She even mentions he was dressed entirely in shining white when she achieved the high priestess rank.
The ultimate lie. Promising warmth and love while intending total spiritual destruction. It really gives you insight into why someone so wounded by life would dedicate herself so completely to the darkest path.
Now that we understand Elaine's personal history, we can examine the structure she rose within. The Brotherhood, according to this narrative, is a highly structured, secretive cult with clear, centralized organization.
How are the key leadership meetings structured?
They're described as councils involving the high priest, the high priestess, which was Elaine, and a fixed number of top occultists, 13 witches and 13 warlocks.
That symmetry suggests a ritualistic structure that permeates even their organizational chart.
It does. And moving to security and enforcement, the source mentions the truly unsettling detail about werewolves.
What exactly did the source claim these entities were, beyond the mythological idea?
The source is very specific here. They were not viewed as elite members. In fact, the werewolves were seen as undesirables by the rest of the cult, because they were seen as totally, irrevocably sold out to Satan and exclusively dedicated to his will. Their primary role was brutally functional. They served as guards and disciplinarians to ensure absolute obedience throughout the organization.
But the physical description goes far beyond mere loyalty. How are they explained mechanically?
The source clarifies that these are human beings who have allowed a highly specific, powerful type of demon to possess them, and that demon causes actual physical changes. They're described as having superhuman strength and the ability to assume animal-like shapes.
And this is critical because it introduces the physical reality of the cult's power into their system of discipline.
Which leads directly to the terrifying reality of their enforcement. The text describes an incident where a werewolf, sent to punish a disobedient member, demonstrated this terrifying physical invulnerability.
What happened?
It was during a disciplinary meeting. A man who was being punished attempted to defend himself and fired 6 shots from a powerful .357 Magnum directly into the werewolf from close range. The source states emphatically that the werewolf never even faltered. The bullets had no discernible effect. Instead, the werewolf proceeded to tear the man to shreds.
So these possessed enforcers were essentially physically immune to conventional attack.
And that cemented the fear necessary for absolute control within the cult.
That shifts the narrative from mere ritualism to a physical deadly threat. Let's turn to the most disturbing claim in the source. The structured, organized practice of ritual sacrifice.
Human sacrifice is reported as an institutional practice of the Brotherhood.
What were the victims and purposes, according to Elaine's testimony?
The victims were most frequently selected as illegitimate babies whose births were undocumented, ensuring there was just no record of their existence.
And the source claims the mothers of these babies were often willing participants.
Yes, because they were already cult members. And they viewed the sacrifice as the highest possible honor to Satan.
And the purpose was defined not just as appeasement, but as a mechanism for power and purification among the members.
Correct. The goal was twofold and very specific. First, to purify the participating members so they could receive Satan's alleged blessings and greater favor.
And second,
And secondly, and perhaps more mechanically, the act of drinking the victim's blood or eating the flesh was believed to gain the members new, higher-level demons and increased spiritual power.
the authors explicitly frame this act as a profound desecration of God's ancient law prohibiting the consumption of blood.
Yes, citing Leviticus.
When did these sacrifices typically occur throughout the year?
They were timed to coincide with 8 holy days per year. This included major Christian holidays like Christmas and Easter, which the cult viewed as opportunities for maximum desecration, along with key seasonal transitions like the solstices and equinoxes.
The source also makes a startling claim, linking this ritualistic practice to a modern phenomenon that shocked the public for years.
Yes, the claim is that the epidemic of harmful substances and objects being placed in trick-or-treat candy.
The razor blades and apples, that kind of thing.
Right. That this was a carefully planned effort by Satanists. The victims, the children who were injured or killed by these contaminated treats, are claimed by the source to be external sacrifices to Satan, part of a masterminded plan to sow terror and claim souls across the population.
Logistically, how does the source explain keeping these vast and highly illegal activities secret?
Elaine described a very disciplined organizational structure dedicated solely to logistics. They had specialized committees, which allegedly included Satanists who had successfully infiltrated law enforcement, to handle all aspects of operation and disposal.
And how did they dispose of the bodies?
Almost always via cremation. They sometimes utilized facilities at nearby mortuaries, veterinary hospitals, or, in the horrific case of babies, the source claims they could be easily ground up using standard household disposal units.
Horrifying.
And the cult constantly rotated its meeting locations, mansions, rental facilities, remote properties, to prevent any single location from drawing law enforcement attention.
Beyond sacrifice, the internal discipline was based on maintaining a climate of absolute fear, including systemic sexual abuse.
That's a defining feature of the internal culture. The source reports that sexual abuse was endemic. A high percentage of cult children were regularly sexually molested from a very young age, often as part of their training or indoctrination.
And the major ceremonies often culminated in sex orgies.
Right, to normalize depravity and break down moral boundaries among the members.
And the concept of demonic sex is introduced here as a form of punishment.
Yes. This involves forced, physical, and brutal sexual intercourse with demons that had manifested physically in the room. This was often inflicted upon unwilling or disobedient members as a terrifying disciplinary measure.
And the source provides a specific example.
It does. Forcing a man to watch multiple manifested demons assault his wife as a way to punish his disobedience. This psychological and spiritual degradation ensured absolute submission.
Let's move to the larger international operations. Elaine references these vast occult conventions and competitions that displayed the cult's global reach.
These were international events held in places like a lavish, dedicated mansion built specifically for the cult in the California hills outside Los Angeles.
And this facility was huge.
Immense. Over 30 bedrooms, huge banquet halls, and most importantly, 3 sub-basements.
And what was down there?
These basements allegedly contained ancient occultic libraries, vaults of forbidden knowledge, and vast stores of gold, silver, and global currency, signifying their financial power and global organization.
These conventions were where she cemented her status, culminating in a definitive public demonstration of power.
This was her most famous test, designed to solidify her position as top bride. She stood just 20 feet away from a man armed with a loaded .357 Magnum.
And she had to protect herself using her powers.
She had to use her full spiritual authority, passing her hand down